We begin with breaking news coming out of the United Kingdom, a developing story that has stunned parents, teachers, communities, and government officials nationwide. Just a minute ago, new numbers were released confirming that more than 44,000 teachers have resigned from their roles across the UK this year, a figure that education authorities are calling unprecedented, alarming, and dangerously destabilizing for the nation's schools. Early reactions on social media have fueled panic, using phrases like migrant violence and school breakdown, but officials are urging caution, insisting that while behavioral incidents have sharply increased, the crisis is far more complex and rooted in systemic failures that go well beyond any single group of students. What we're witnessing is not just a staffing shortage, it is a structural collapse of the support networks that once held British education together. Teachers from across the country, from Manchester to Birmingham to East London, describe their classrooms as overwhelmed beyond imagination. Many say they are handling nearly double the workload they had before the pandemic. Class sizes are soaring, with some teachers reporting to students in spaces never designed for more than. Schools are absorbing a record influx of newly enrolled pupils, some from families moving into the UK, others from communities facing displacement, and the rapid pace of change has left schools struggling to provide proper support. These students often arrive with emotional challenges, cultural differences, or language barriers, and while educators emphasize they want to help every child succeed, they admit the system simply hasn't provided the resources to meet such a massive demand. One teacher described her school as a pressure cooker with no safety valve, where misunderstandings escalate quickly because adults are stretched too thin to intervene early. Inside many schools, the situation is becoming increasingly volatile. Not because children are inherently violent, officials stress, but because overcrowded classrooms create fertile ground for conflict. Teachers report seeing fights break out over small arguments, miscommunication between students who don't share a language, and emotional outbursts from children dealing with trauma, stress, or social instability. In the past, trained staff behavior specialists, counselors, translators, pastoral workers would step in, but many of those positions have been cut. Today, teachers often find themselves alone, trying to manage crisis after crisis with no training in de-escalation, trauma response, or multicultural communication. One teacher described spending her entire lunch break calming a distressed student, only to return to class and deal with another incident minutes later. "It feels like drowning," she said. "Not because of the kids, because the system has abandoned us." Meanwhile, the wave of resignations is accelerating. Teachers who once planned to spend their careers in education are now walking away, often in tears, often with guilt, often with deep frustration that they cannot give students the structure and support they deserve. Many say they made the painful decision because the job has become emotionally destructive. Work days stretch from early morning to late evening. Incident reports pile up. Parents send urgent messages expecting immediate responses. Administrators, overwhelmed themselves, offer sympathy but few solutions. And with each teacher who leaves, the burden on those who remain intensifies, fueling a vicious cycle of burnout and resignations. Some schools have seen turnover rates so high that they've had to merge classes, cancel programs, and rotate temporary staff who barely stay long enough to learn student names. Parents are now sounding the alarm as well. Many say communication from schools has become inconsistent and chaotic. Some have received multiple letters in a single month about behavioral concerns. Others report that their children have witnessed fights or disruptions that left them shaken. Some schools have had to close for partial days due to insufficient staffing. Others have substituted teaching assistants for qualified teachers, limiting the quality of education. A parent from Leeds said, "My son's school used to feel like a community. Now it feels like a battlefield where teachers are outnumbered and children are lost in the noise." These reports have only deepened public anxiety, especially as trending posts online amplify the narrative of migrant violence. Even though education officials continue to stress that blaming a specific group is misleading, harmful, and overshadows the real, systemic issues at play. Tonight, the debate has reached Parliament, triggering one of the most heated exchanges seen in months. Opposition has accused the government of ignoring years of warnings about staff shortages and funding cuts. They argue that teachers have been carrying the weight of a broken system expected to manage mental health crises, integration challenges, social tension, behavioral outbursts, and overcrowded classrooms without adequate support. Government ministers countered that investments have been made, but unions say those investments were too small to catch up to the scale of need. Several elements are calling for an emergency national task force to stabilize schools, demanding immediate expansion of support staff, mandatory behavioral teams in every school, and urgent recruitment incentives to bring teachers back into the profession. In private briefings, head teachers are painting an even more dire picture. One described a situation where a single teacher was responsible for supervising nearly students in a shared space due to staffing shortages. Another admitted that her school's behavioral support team had shrunk from 12 staff members to 4, leaving only one person available during lunch breaks. In one London school, an assistant head teacher said the number of behavioral incidents had tripled since September, with teachers reporting that they are emotionally exhausted, physically drained, and constantly fearful that the next big conflict will erupt when they are alone with 30 children and no backup. These stories are heartbreaking, disturbing, and increasingly common. Authorities tonight are addressing the widespread use of the phrase migrant violence, urging the public to understand the broader context. Many of the children newly entering up classrooms are fleeing hardship, instability, or trauma in their home countries. They may struggle with English, they may be overwhelmed, they may not fully understand school expectations. Officials warn that without proper integration support, without translators, counselors, mental health teams, schools cannot provide what these students need. Misunderstandings then escalate, parents panic, teachers burn out, and social media twists isolated incidents into trending narratives that worsen division. The government's message is clear: the issue is not who the students are, it is the system that has failed to prepare for such rapid and complex demographic changes. Experts warn that the long-term consequences of this collapse could reshape an entire generation. When classrooms are overcrowded, learning quality plummets. When teachers leave faster than replacements can be trained, students suffer from instability and inconsistency. When behavioral issues go unmanaged, school culture deteriorates. When support teams are understaffed, vulnerable students fall through the cracks. Academics fear the UP may see a sharp decline in national education standards, increased absenteeism, rising anxiety among children, and a widening gap between well-resourced schools and those left struggling to survive. Unlike, there is a sense of fear but also urgency. Teachers want protection and support, parents want communication and stability, students want structure, safety, and clarity, communities want reassurance that schools will remain places of learning, not arenas of chaos, and officials want the public to stay calm, avoid misinformation, and focus on the real solution: rebuilding the education system from the ground up. The crisis is not rooted in culture or identity, it is rooted in years of underfunding, understaffing, and failure to adapt to modern challenges. As the story evolves, all eyes are on the government's next move. Will there be a national intervention? Will emergency staffing be deployed? Will behavioral teams and integration specialists be reinstated? Or will the system continue to unravel? For now, the facts are undeniable. 44,000 teachers gone, behavioral incidents rising, schools under strain, and the future of millions of students caught in the balance. This is a story far from over. As more updates break, we'll bring them to you live. Stay with us.